Last month, Bungie, the video game company, was the victim of false DMCAs on YouTube, and the situation's pretty bad. Bungie actually had a lot of trouble getting the situation resolved, and in the process, a lot of people were very angry at Bungie for sending these false DMCA notices when it turns out that it wasn't Bungie that sent the false DMCA notices. It was kind of a false flag operation. In this story, you'll see just how insecure YouTube's DMCA takedown practices are. Their implementation of the law is about as weak as it has always been, and now you can see what happens when Bungie becomes the victim of it. We've seen so many smaller creators, medium creators, even larger creators be the victims of false DMCAs, false takedown notices under the law, and YouTube responds mediocrely. They respond slowly and inadequately often. And I've had clients who have tried to counter notice and YouTube won't respond to their counter notice, or YouTube doesn't implement their counter notice because YouTube disagrees with the counter notice. But they don't seem to have any problem with disagreeing with false DMCA takedown notices in the first instance. So you'll see what happens when a large company like Bungie has the same problem as everybody else does. They're going to tell the story here from beginning to end in a lawsuit that they filed in the Western District of Washington, a complaint for fraudulent DMCA notices, false designation of origin, which is trademark, direct copyright infringement, business defamation and violation of the Washington Consumer Protection Act, and breach of contract in that the license agreement, the software license agreement or end user license agreement was violated. So we're going to jump right into this and take a look at what Bungie filed. This action arises out of a series of fraudulent Digital Millennium Copyright Act takedown notices that an unauthorized and malicious actor or actors, the DOE defendants, provided to YouTube with respect to content that supposedly infringed Bungie's copyrights in its popular and successful Destiny franchise, disrupting Bungie's community of players, streamers, and fans, causing Bungie nearly incalculable damage. DOE defendants were able to do this because of a hole in YouTube's DMCA process security, which allows any person to claim to be representing any rights holder in the world for purposes of issuing a DMCA takedown. In other words, as far as YouTube is concerned, any person anywhere in the world can issue takedown notices on behalf of any rights holder anywhere. A disgruntled infringer or a competitive content producer, for example, can issue takedown notices purportedly on behalf of Disney, Fox, or Universal, or even Google itself. All they need to do is, 1, fill out the video removal form, and 2, have a Google account, including one created that same day with fake information. And 3, fill out information and click verification buttons, fraudulently certifying that they have the right to submit the takedown request, with no verification done by YouTube. Between March 17th, 2022 and March 22nd, a malicious actor or actors exploited that gaping security loophole to issue takedowns purportedly on behalf of Bungie to YouTubers and streamers who had, with Bungie's permission, as granted in Bungie's legal policy on media, who had uploaded videos of their gameplay to YouTube. Using a fake Gmail address that was newly created, which did not match the addresses used by Bungie's brand protection vendor for legitimate notices, although it had a similar syntax to those addresses, and had been deliberately chosen so as to cause maximum confusion among recipients and lead them to believe that it was legitimate, and via notices that were otherwise inconsistent with the substance of Bungie's legitimate DMCA notices, DOE defendants issued a wave of takedown notices targeting non-infringing Destiny 2 videos. Using the same fake Gmail address, DOE defendants circulated messaging to affected uploaders that appeared calculated to discredit the authenticity of takedown notices legitimately issued by Bungie's authorized brand protection vendor by claiming falsely that DMCA notices attaching the authorized vendor's email address, davidthompsoncsc@gmail.com, were also fraudulent. Kind of like the first Jack Reacher film where the murderer killed 13 people in order to get to one of them and kind of make it confusing as to why that one person would be targeted. This is the same kind of thing. Bungie sends legitimate takedown notices, and then the recipients of those legitimate notices, somebody responds by sending a bunch of false ones to try and discredit the takedown notice system and make it more confusing which ones are legitimate and which ones are not. Using a second fake Gmail address that was newly created, which did not match the addresses used by Bungie's brand protection vendor for legitimate notices, Doe defendants sent abusive messages to the email address of Bungie's authorized brand protection vendor. This caused Bungie significant reputational and economic damage. The Destiny community was bewildered and upset, believing that Bungie had reneged on a promise to allow players to build their own streaming communities and YouTube channels on Destiny 2 content. Destiny community members were also misled to believe that Bungie's brand protection agent was also fraudulent, causing confusion among users as to the authenticity of legitimate DMCA notices. Bungie had to devote significant internal resources to addressing it and helping its players restore their videos and channels, an effort complicated by the fact that while YouTube has a form that allows anyone to claim to represent a copyright holder and issue copyright strikes, it has no dedicated mechanism for copyright holders who are being impersonated to let YouTube know about the DMCA fraud. As detailed below, this meant that Bungie had to work through several layers of YouTube contacts before it could adequately communicate and begin addressing the problem. You guys remember House MD, that Hugh Laurie show where he was this diagnostician, and I feel like half the problems he solved were simply by letting the problem get worse till it finally presented itself in a way that he could recognize. It's kind of satisfying in sort of a morbid way. It's kind of satisfying to see that Bungie has the same problems that all of us smaller creators have experienced over the years. That we've seen other smaller creators be victims to it. We've complained to YouTube. We've brought up these issues so many times. Now it affects Bungie. Now it's resulted in this lawsuit. Maybe this is the tipping point. It's probably not. Plan for the worst, hope for the best, but I'm hoping that this will cause YouTube to reevaluate how it allows these DMCA notices without any verification whatsoever. Though Bungie does not currently know the identities of Doe defendants, whose anonymous conduct occurred just days ago, that was March 25th, it will discover them soon via Section 512H subpoenas or otherwise, and will promptly amend this complaint once it does. And Bungie has requested those subpoenas, but the court has not approved them yet. For now, though, and particularly given the ease with which malicious actors can exploit YouTube's flawed DMCA practice and harm Bungie's community, Bungie brings this action to recover for the Doe defendants' tortious and illegal conduct and, frankly, to demonstrate to anyone else stupid enough to volunteer as a defendant by targeting Bungie's community for similar attack that they will be met by legal process. That's some strong language there from Bungie. I'm liking this so far. So you always have to include a statement about jurisdiction in a federal complaint. And they say this court has personal jurisdiction over the Doe defendants because Doe defendants are Destiny 2 players who consented to jurisdiction in the state and federal courts of King County, Washington, by accepting the terms of Destiny 2's Limited Software License Agreement, the LSLA, which provides that the licensee agrees to submit to the personal jurisdiction of any federal or state court in King County, Washington. Background. Destiny 2 is a shared world online first-person shooter. Members of the Destiny 2 community do more than just play the game. Content creators build fan followings of their own for their gameplay or commentary, which is often streamed to followers and subscribers and or uploaded to YouTube for asynchronous viewing or video on demand. Because Bungie wants its community to be able to share and discuss Destiny gameplay and elements, but also wishes to protect its intellectual property, Bungie has adopted a comprehensive policy governing its players' use, display, and performance of Bungie's copyrighted works. Bungie strongly supports the efforts of our community to produce non-commercial content using video, images, footage, music, sounds, dialogue, or other assets from our games, subject to a few conditions, and generally approves streaming or commentary through approved platforms like Twitch, YouTube, or Facebook. Bungie permits players to create videos using Destiny gameplay, provided the videos contain substantial player-created content. This is something I've been talking about for a while. If you play a game, aren't you the one making the creative inputs? in the existing framework provided by the developer, as opposed to like a movie where you passively enjoy it. You can't share the movie, it's not your creative content. But if you play a game, can the developer or publisher or distributor legitimately claim copyright to your playing the game? They built the framework, you're the one making the creative content. I think it's a fair use or something along those lines, implied license or something. Here, Bungie, of course, expressly authorizes that, except Bungie specifically notes that the sharing of videos that are primarily Bungie-created content, just the trailers or cutscenes, that's not allowed. Similarly, uploading songs from Bungie's soundtracks ripped from the game files of Destiny 2 does not comply with Bungie's intellectual property policy. Bungie uses a vendor, CSC Global, to handle its DMCA takedown notices for infringing content that does not comply with Bungie's intellectual property policy, including content uploaded to YouTube. YouTube's DMCA reporting form requires the reporting party to use a Google account if the reporting party processes DMCA requests via a YouTube content management product like the Creator Studio or Content Manager. For that reason, CSC created and uses the davidthompsoncsc@gmail.com account for its DMCA work relating to YouTube videos. At no point does CSC issue takedown notices on YouTube uploads related to Destiny without specific approval from Bungie's legal department. So it sounds like Bungie does not issue takedown notices or has not authorized CSC to issue takedown notices unless it goes through an actual person at Bungie Legal. That's good. That's the way we want it to be done. The automated takedowns, those are the ones that I have a problem with. CSC maintains a record of the DMCA takedowns it executes on Bungie's behalf. On or about March 2nd, 2022, at Bungie's direction, CSC initiated a series of DMCA takedowns, so 41 takedowns on March 2nd, relating to infringing content that had been uploaded to YouTube. We're going to call these the early March takedowns. All 41 early March takedowns related to music from Destiny 2's original soundtracks, OSTs. YouTube's actions in response to the early March takedowns were complete on or about March 16th. Then, the Doe defendants' retaliatory attack. Doe defendants were among the YouTubers whose videos received legitimate DMCA takedowns as part of the early March takedowns. Beginning on or about March 17th, those Doe defendants began submitting unauthorized DMCA takedown notices to YouTube for videos that allegedly infringed Bungie's copyrights. We're going to call these the fraudulent takedown notices. Doe defendants created fake namecsc@gmail.com Google accounts in order to submit the fraudulent takedown notices. So they look like the davidthompsoncsc@gmail.com format, but they're different. Doe defendants identified themselves as Bungie Inc. when submitting some or all of the fraudulent takedown notices. Doe defendants had no authority to submit any of the fraudulent takedown notices. Despite that, the defendants submitted fraudulent takedown notices targeting many members of the Destiny community, including My Name is Biff, a Destiny YouTuber with 966,000 subscribers, Aztec Ross, a YouTuber with 594,000 subscribers, The Phoenix with 54,000 YouTube subscribers, and Promethean Archival Mind, a Destiny YouTuber with 17,800 subscribers. Indeed, Bungie's own official Destiny YouTube channel got hit with a fraudulent takedown notice. Thanks to YouTube's easily gamed reporting system, the attack was a success and videos were removed and YouTubers given copyright strikes that, under YouTube rules, threaten the future viability of their YouTube channels on the basis of the fraudulent takedown notices. Doe defendants disseminated misinformation via an email from the fraudulent address jeremywildandcsc@gmail.com. In this email, Doe defendants claimed falsely that the legitimate agent's address, davidthompsoncsc@gmail.com, had been issuing false takedowns for years, causing confusion among recipients of legitimate DMCA notifications, and calculated to cause the recipients of legitimate takedown notices to file inappropriate copyright counter notifications with YouTube. Doe defendants filed a fraudulent DMCA notice targeting their own YouTube channel, purportedly on behalf of Bungie, using that fraudulent alias Jeremy Wyland at csc@gmail.com. They spell it two different ways here. I'm not sure if it was actually different or they just misspelled it here. Doe defendants filed a fraudulent copyright counter notice with YouTube claiming that both the legitimate and the fraudulent copyright notifications were fraudulent. The community impact and Bungie's response. Doe defendants' attack sent shockwaves through the Destiny community. Community members described the loss of the falsely struck content as heartbreaking, horrible, and legitimately a tragedy. Content creators described the chilling effect the false takedowns had on their own work, saying, "I'm scared to make new Destiny videos, let alone keep the ones I've already made up, and I'm just worried that my channel is gone forever because of this." As one community member explained, some of the people running these channels used their main accounts for this, and they couldn't take the risk. Just unlisting videos doesn't protect them from strikes at all. It was self-delete or get permanently blacklisted by Google. The community's sorrow quickly turned to anger. Many fans reacted with disbelief and frustration, saying Bungie has always been a company that isn't a shitty soulless corp with this stuff, and I'd super appreciate it if y'all can send this up the flagpole to whoever can look into this. And this is the type of thing that alienates a dev company from their fans. It's damaging the community, and I don't understand it, to be honest. Community members felt disregarded and betrayed, saying it feels like they don't care or are complicit. Because the false takedown emails used the same CSC identification style as the authorized agent, many members believed that these were authorized takedowns, saying, Bungie hired a third party to enforce copyright. This is 100% on Bungie. And the reaction was not confined to the Destiny community. The fraudulent takedown notices and their aftermath also garnered significant media attention, being reported on at gamesindustry.biz, gamespot.com, PC Gamer, Forbes, and even the German web portal WinFuture. On March 18th, when the first complaints about the takedown notices began coming to Bungie's attention, Bungie's Deputy General Counsel, James Barker, reached out to Bungie's brand protection team at CSC to inquire about a suspicious takedown targeting Aztec Cross that was described via social media, noting that he did not see the Aztec Cross takedown in the CSC provided list of completed takedowns or any requests targeting Aztec Cross, and asking CSC to confirm whether there was a takedown. By email, roughly half an hour later, CSC responded that it had no such record either, nor any secondary records that would suggest any such takedown had occurred by mistake, and asked for more information so that it could confirm with certainty that it was not the source. After being provided the details on the timing of the copyright complaint filed against Aztec Cross, CSC confirmed that they had no record and the complaint likely did not come from them. Mr. Barker then forwarded the image of the takedown from the user, noting the oddity of the fact that the notice indicated the content was removed by Bungie Inc., when any removals handled by CSC would not have used that language, and Bungie had not authorized anyone else to issue takedowns. Here is a picture of the takedown. Content removed by Bungie Inc., it says. Based on those issues, Mr. Barker asked if CSC believed it could be a spoof, and CSC responded that it believed so, but would need until Monday, March 21st to confirm fully. In response, Mr. Barker directed CSC to do what it could to get the video reinstated, as it did not violate Bungie's guidelines. CSC issued a retraction notice requesting reinstatement of the video, but YouTube responded that it had denied the retraction request because the retraction notice was not sent from the same email that had issued the initial fraudulent takedown notice. In the interim, the nature of Doe defendants' impersonation of Bungie had become clear, and Bungie had reached out to YouTube to try and address the issue. And here's where it gets really frustrating for all of us when we try to contact YouTube for support and you basically get a brick wall. On Saturday, March 19th, under the direction of Bungie's legal team, Bungie's social media manager reached out to the account representative for Bungie's YouTube channel, Walker Adamson, to report that they had seen a number of additional users and their own channel get hit with takedowns from a Bungie Inc. Bungie also informed Adamson it had confirmed that it was a malicious impersonator and asked for Google's assistance identifying Doe defendants and next steps to prevent the attack from continuing or recurring. 10 minutes later, after receiving an out-of-office notification from Mr. Adamson, Bungie's social media manager passed the same message along to Magali Hoot, Google's head of games publishers, and the person that the out-of-office message identified as available to help while account representative Adamson was out. An hour later, having received no response, Mr. Barker added Bungie's legal department to the email conversation and CC'd Bungie's general counsel, Don McGowan, indicating how serious of an issue the attack was for Bungie, providing details on Bungie's legitimate takedown notices, and asking Google to provide information on the Doe defendants. Mr. Barker also instructed Google to block any new DMCA reports that purported to be on Bungie's behalf until further notice. Google did none of those things. Thus, on Sunday, March 20th, and having received no response, Mr. Barker emailed Ms. Hutt to note that the situation was escalating and that a number of troubled streamers and that a number of trusted streamers, including My Name is Biff and Aztec Cross, were receiving fraudulent takedown notices. Mr. Barker asked Ms. Hutt for a response as soon as possible, information on how the Doe defendants were able to so easily impersonate Bungie, and, most importantly, information on what YouTube could do to begin mitigating the damage done to our community streamers. Mr. Barker also asked for a more reliable way to contact someone at YouTube to handle exigent issues like this one. Something that we have all been asking for years. How do you get a person who is competent and able to help at YouTube when you have legitimate, sincere issues like this? It's disappointing that YouTube considers that not to be a priority. Roughly 40 minutes later, having still received no response, it was the turn of Bungie's global franchise director to try to get some sort of response from Google regarding the spiraling problem. Thus, at 2:08 Pacific, Bungie's global finance director emailed additional Google personnel, Luma Hamade, Jason Bentley, Kendra Johnson, and Andrew Conway, along with Ms. Hutt, to reiterate that Bungie had a corporate impersonator who is doing damage to some of our trusted community streamers on YouTube, and that Bungie was looking to connect with someone who could assist, and specifically to introduce Mr. Barker to the Google team. Mr. Barker then responded with a recap of the issues described above, repeating the information Bungie had already provided to Google, that someone was impersonating Bungie and sending fraudulent DMCA notices to members of the Bungie community. Mr. Barker also reiterated Bungie's requests that Google 1. Block new takedown requests, 2. Restore any takedowns processed after March 16th, and 3. Obtain and provide information about the Doe defendants and how they were able to accomplish their takedowns. Ms. Johnson, YouTube's director of gaming publishers and commerce content partners, responded to ask whether the issue was that Bungie's channel had been compromised or only that it was being impersonated as part of DMCA takedowns, and whether Bungie had gone through the standard channels to file a help ticket, which is always frustrating because you'll go to YouTube for help and they'll just send you a link back that says, please read our support article on how to send a DMCA takedown or how to issue a counter notification. And it doesn't actually help you because you've already tried that, because you were a smart person who decided, I'm going to do these things in the background and not bug YouTube until I need to. And then when you go to YouTube, they tell you, oh, by the way, did you turn it off and back on again? It's very frustrating. Mr. Barker replied that the issue was simply the DMCA-related impersonation, and that YouTube's opaque support process was running them through a circular loop from contact us back to the help community. Again, I'm not reveling in Bungie's difficulty, but it is refreshing to see that Bungie has the same problem that everybody else does. Whereas previously it seemed like YouTube only did this to their smaller creators. Now they're also doing this to their bigger creators, so this will get more attention now. I'm hopeful. Ms. Johnson responded that she would connect with YouTube's takedown notice team and report back. On Monday the 21st, Ms. Hutt also responded to Mr. Barker's email about the escalating situation to apologize for the delay, and note that she was looping back in Mr. Adamson and they would get back to Bungie as quickly as possible that day. At 11 a.m., Mr. Barker reached back out to Mr. Adamson and Ms. Hutt to update them on some of the developments discussed in more detail below. That Bungie had identified the Jeremy Weiland CSC gmail.com email address as responsible for at least some of the takedown notices, and a Damian Reynolds CSC at Gmail was sending taunting and threatening emails to CSC. Mr. Barker reiterated that the only people authorized to issue DMCA notices on YouTube were CSC, and provided the 2 legitimate email addresses from which such notices might come. 5:29 p.m., Mr. Barker emailed Mr. Adamson to note that he was looking forward to any updates, and pointed out that while several of the unauthorized takedowns had been reversed, Bungie still had no way to tell how many had been issued, but had not yet been brought to Bungie's attention through social media. At 8:09 p.m. that day, I think we're still on March 21st, David from YouTube's gaming support team responded that YouTube did not have an update yet, but should be able to provide one by Tuesday the 22nd. Tuesday the 22nd, 1:17 p.m. Having not received the promised update, Mr. Barker again asked for Google to speed up its response and provide critical information. Here's the message. We need a couple of things urgently in order to mitigate the harm to our community. A list of all the channels and uploads that were actioned by the 2 users who used the fraudulent email addresses so that we can request reinstatement. A list of all channels and uploads that have been actioned purportedly on behalf of Bungie and the email addresses attached to those actions. What you are able to do in order to make sure that takedowns on YouTube that are sent on behalf of Bungie are only an approved set of email addresses. What you are able to provide about the identities of the users who have actioned on behalf of Bungie, as these threat actors are causing active harm to CSC's reputation and to ours, and have threatened employees at CSC. 3:18 p.m. March 22nd, Google provided an update. It had terminated the accounts that submitted the fraudulent requests, and all fraudulent submissions would be reversed, but Google would not share any identifying information about who the fraudulent users were, including channel identifiers, email addresses, other identifying information, without a law enforcement request or civil process. So hence Bungie needing to file a lawsuit and then seek a subpoena. Fortunately for the people whose videos were targeted by the fraudulent takedown notices, Bungie has the financial resources to begin that civil process in order to meet Google's requirements. So many of my clients and so many of my inquiring consultations, they want to know what they can do. And when I get to the part where really what they have to do is file a lawsuit against the false claimant and then get the court to issue some sort of subpoena or order identifying the false claimant and forcing them to re-implement the video or reinstate the video, they don't want to do that. It's too costly and it exposes them to too much, so they don't do it. Doe defendant's confession and harassment of CSC. While Bungie's legal department, management, and executives were attempting to negotiate the Byzantine procedural labyrinth Google required before it would address the fraud its users were committing, let alone identify the fraudsters, Doe defendants themselves were gloating, confessing, and threatening. Over the weekend, the Damian Reynolds account began sending threatening emails to CSC with the subject line, "You're in for it now," and telling CSC, "Better start running, the clock is ticking." 12:41 a.m. Monday the 21st, Damian Reynolds emailed davidthompsoncsc@gmail.com the following. "Hope striking everyone's content was worth it, asshat. You've now got Bungie's full attention. You really ought to grow up and get a life instead of tormenting people from behind a screen like an effing coward. If I were you, I'd delete my Google account right now, because Bungie and probably even Google are going to come after you hard." Meanwhile, 2 YouTubers, Aussie Halo and Bresci, each forwarded Bungie's community team an email purporting to be from the Jeremy Wildlands account taking credit for the fraud. They're going to call it the manifesto. The manifesto reads like a hackneyed "look what you made me do" letter from the serial killer in a bad novel. It says, "Greetings. I'm one of the people who filed false takedowns on videos uploaded by you and others in the Destiny community. The other person filing takedowns is davidthompsoncsc@gmail.com. That's the legitimate address, whom I will refer to as David Thompson. I'm not aware of any other addresses that are being used to issue fraudulent takedowns. I am also keeping some parts of this email confidential for obvious reasons. With that said, there's more to this that you should know. As is obvious, I'm not employed by CSC and I have no affiliation with Bungie. The same applies to David Thompson. YouTube's copyright takedown system is incredibly flawed. Their verification system for takedown requests is so gullible that people, such as I and David Thompson, are able to file takedowns without any legitimacy to our names. If you're looking to place blame, place it on YouTube for its sloppy copyright takedown system and Bungie for ignoring this issue for so long. I could tell you how I got YouTube to think I was a legitimate representative for Bungie. All it took was a single sentence. No documents, no license, no private information. Also, I did not issue takedowns on Bungie's own channels. Whoever did that is further proof that YouTube doesn't verify the identities of takedown claimants. I was directly affected by false takedowns from David Thompson several months ago, and many others were issued false takedowns by this person over the past several years. I believed, with enough attention, Bungie might have been prompted to step in. The first few channels that were hit by takedowns didn't seem to grab anyone's attention, so I had to escalate the matter. If I hadn't escalated the issue, many people would not have had their takedowns removed. You may choose not to believe me, but at least I responded to some of the people whose videos I took down. The other frauds like David Thompson never reply because they're spiteful cowards who want their victims to feel helpless and afraid. David Thompson has also been issuing false takedowns for years with no repercussions, although unlike me, they have been playing it safe up till now by only issuing takedowns on a few videos to avoid Bungie's radar. I intended to get caught so that Bungie would take heed of the corruption that has been ensuing in the center of their YouTube community. I fully intended to retract my takedowns and stop issuing them after Bungie had acknowledged the issue and begun restoring people's channels or videos or otherwise. If David Thompson went after more videos, I wouldn't be able to remove the takedowns since takedowns can only be retracted from the original claimant's email address. Otherwise, I would have undone all of their actions and prevented this altogether. None of this was about copyright infringement, nor did it have anything to do with the Sony acquisition. In the future, you should expect claimant's email address in the contact info field of a copyright takedown notice made on behalf of a large studio like Bungie to originate from a domain other than Gmail when determining its legitimacy. Finally, I know this hardly means anything, but I apologize to you and everyone else who was affected by my selfish actions. You have every right to be furious with me. My goal was to get Bungie to see the fake takedowns and stop them, that's all. So it appears that the sender of the false takedowns was really interested in doing like a kind of a false flag action where they muddy the waters by sending false takedowns and then trying to lump the legitimate takedowns in with the false ones and making Bungie look bad. And it worked for at least a period of time, and hopefully this lawsuit and videos like mine will help clear that up, that Bungie wasn't the sender, that CSC wasn't the sender of the fraudulent takedown notices. Let's take a look at the causes of action. The first cause of action is DMCA 512F, which is false misrepresentations. While Bungie is not yet aware of the specific content alleged in each of the fraudulent takedown notices to have been infringed, upon information and belief, each alleged infringement was an alleged infringement of content for which Bungie has registered the copyright, or for which only Bungie is capable of registering a copyright, including content from Destiny 2: The Witch Queen. Bungie did not authorize Doe defendants to submit DMCA takedown notices on its behalf. Doe defendants had no right to submit the fraudulent takedown notices. At least some of the content that was the subject of the fraudulent takedown notices was not infringing because it complied with Bungie's intellectual property policy, and therefore the YouTubers who posted it did so under license from Bungie. The fraudulent takedown notices were based on knowing and material misrepresentations in violation of copyright law. At least some of the Doe defendants, relying on the confusion created by their fraudulent activity, also filed knowingly false counter notices challenging the legitimacy of the valid notices addressed to their infringing content. The second cause of action is false designation of origin under trademark law. So Bungie owns trademarks. Submission of a takedown notice to YouTube is an act that impacts interstate commerce and therefore is commercial activity under the Trademark Act, the Lanham Act. By submitting a fraudulent takedown notice to YouTube under the name Bungie, Doe defendants used the Bungie mark in connection with a service. Doe defendants' use of the Bungie mark was likely to, and in fact did, cause confusion and mistake, and was likely to, and did in fact deceive, as to the association of Doe defendants with Bungie, and as to Bungie's sponsorship or approval of the submission of the fraudulent takedown notices in violation of trademark law. Then they assert direct copyright infringement. By submitting the fraudulent takedown notices, Doe defendants infringed on Bungie's right to authorize the public display and performance of its copyrighted works. That infringement was willful, as evidenced by the manifesto. As such, Bungie is requesting $150,000 in statutory damages for each fraudulent notice. Now, this will be a point of contention because it's often statutory damages per work infringed, not necessarily per takedown notice or per view or something like that. But this is something that plaintiffs say and then courts get to work out later. In addition, content uploaded to YouTube by one or more of the Doe defendants was subject to DMCA takedown notices submitted on Bungie's behalf. Until Doe defendants are identified, Bungie cannot determine with certainty which of its copyrighted content Doe defendants infringed, but Doe defendants likely infringed content in which Bungie held a registered copyright, including this copyright listed here. While as a general policy and in the absence of factors beyond simply an infringing upload, Bungie does not typically sue infringers whose uploads were the subject of a DMCA notice. Doe defendants' malicious conduct in filing the fraudulent takedown notices is more than enough in Bungie's judgment to qualify as an additional factor warranting an infringement suit for any infringement that was the subject of a legitimate DMCA notice. Bungie is thus entitled to actual or statutory damages for Doe defendants' infringements that were the subject of the DMCA notices directed at Doe defendants' uploads, as well as preliminary and permanent injunctive relief costs and attorney's fees. They also allege business defamation, that the fraudulent notices included the false claim that they were submitted by or on behalf of Bungie. They made that false claim with knowledge of its falsity. They made that false claim with knowledge that YouTube would pass along the false assertion to the targeted YouTubers. They made that false claim with the intent that the targeted YouTubers would report to their subscribers, followers, and friends that Bungie had taken down their videos or channels. That the Doe defendants' intent was to cause anger and consternation at Bungie within the Destiny community so as to get Bungie's attention and or stop Bungie from sending future legitimate takedown notices against Doe defendants' illegally uploaded content. This intentional and malicious conduct resulted in harm to Bungie's reputation. As a direct result of the defendants' defamatory statements, Bungie has incurred and continues to incur damages in an amount to be proven at trial. Then there's the Washington Consumer Protection Act claim that Doe defendants have engaged in unfair and deceptive acts by fraudulently impersonating Bungie. That Doe defendants' manifesto is calculated to discredit the authenticity of legitimate takedown notices issued by Bungie and CSC. That the manifesto has already resulted in confusion among the creator community. That there is a strong public interest in protecting creators and businesses from bad actors impersonating and misrepresenting them in the marketplace. That those unfair and deceptive acts have directly and proximately caused Bungie to incur damages, and Bungie is entitled to an award of damages, plus a trebling or tripling of those damages for the willful malicious act, and attorney's fees as allowed. Also, breach of contract. The limited software license agreement is a valid binding contract between Bungie and each individual player of Destiny 2. Destiny 2 cannot be played unless the user agrees to that license agreement. Based on the fact that Doe defendants uploaded videos that contained content infringing Bungie's copyrights, they must have played Destiny 2, and therefore they must have agreed to the licensing agreement. That licensing agreement prohibits users from copying, reproducing, distributing, displaying, or using any part of Destiny 2 except as expressly authorized by Bungie. Doe defendants have thus breached the license agreement, and Bungie is entitled to damages in an amount to be proven at trial. So that's interesting. I've often said that when you have a copyright and a license agreement covering that copyright, you often can't sue for both contract breach and copyright. Usually it's contract. You've got a software license agreement, so if you breach that, then you're in breach of the contract, and the damages are contract damages, not copyright damages. So that's an interesting defense that the defendants will have to decide for themselves whether they assert that kind of defense, assuming that Bungie actually gets to them. Prayer for relief, then. Bungie wants damages in an amount to be proven at trial, preliminary and permanent injunctive relief barring defendants from impersonating Bungie or further infringing Bungie's copyright or trademarks. costs, attorney's fees, interest, punitive damages as allowed by law, and any other relief that the court deems just and proper. That was filed on March 24th. I'm just getting into it now, but I hope you enjoyed seeing both sides of that. It's great to see the Doe defendants who committed this heinous act of sending false DMCA notices. They should be sued, and they should suffer whatever Bungie determines is the consequences, whatever the law determines are the consequences for those actions. Bungie should be made whole in as much as possible, although I find it practically difficult to believe that the individuals will have the resources to make Bungie whole, but there will be some kind of settlement or some kind of agreement, assuming that Bungie can actually get to those defendants. How do they get to those defendants? Well, they've already asked the court to subpoena YouTube for all of the information that will be necessary to find those defendants. And assuming that some of that information is able to be traced back to a particular person, then Bungie would likely be able to sue that individual person. That individual person or those individuals will then be served, and they will have to answer the complaint. If they took steps to cover their tracks, it's possible that Bungie will not be able to get a hold of them, will not be able to grab them with the long arm of the law. On the other hand, it's also refreshing to see that Bungie has the same problems with YouTube that we've all been complaining about for years. And it's kind of embarrassing for YouTube. It should be shameful and embarrassing for YouTube that they allow this. They've allowed this practice to go on for years. YouTube has made their own DMCA notification and takedown notice system, and they've made their own rules as well. I don't think the rules that they've made are so far outside the DMCA that YouTube will ever be taken to task for it, but it's interesting to see that YouTube has made it very easy for YouTube, but very difficult for their customers, including Bungie. Maybe now that some big company is affected by it, maybe we'll see positive changes at YouTube. I give it a 50% chance. Let me know what you think of that story and your frustrations with YouTube and what you think should be done to the Doe defendants in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my top supporters in April: John Steele, Eevi, Spirit Bear, Benjamin Hitov, Ugly Grill, Torpedan, Gutbrodj, ShadowTycho, Earthbound Star, PureMagma, Eric Tams, TechTechPotato, The Blood-Soaked Survivors, Wyatt, Calandro, and King Aries. You can support Lawful Masses on patreon.com/ljfrench, sponsors.com/law, through YouTube memberships, and through Floatplane subscriptions. Join me for our weekly live production stream on twitch.tv/lawfulmasses on Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern US time. I hope everyone has a great week. I love you all. Bye.